You are listening to Confessions of a Counselor podcast. Here we will talk all things mental health in bite-sized chunks. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Confessions of a Counselor. I'm your host Janice, and in today's episode, I thought we would dive into something that I hear often in therapy, which is, I wish I had known that sooner, and talking about coping strategies that can really help and support us in understanding and learning about our unique abilities. How people with neurodivergent experience can really move through the therapy process and start to thrive once they understand what's going on. So living in a world that is designed for neurotypical brains can be really challenging. And so many people try for years and years to figure out how they can live in this neurotypical world and feeling like there's something wrong with them. So I've created some strategies that can help us learn how to thrive, not just survive in a society that isn't necessarily built for us. So let's jump right in. One of the biggest aha moments is understanding that a unique operating system. So we talked about this in past episodes, but really starting to understand how your brain works and how it's functioning can really help us to kind of understand that user manual that we're working with, and understanding what's going on for each individual person. So instead of trying to force ourselves to do something the way others would do it, we can learn how each person's brain functions and operates and processes information. And then we can start to create strategies that work with that operating system rather than against it. So for example, let's say that we feel really overwhelmed and find loud noises and busy scenarios really overwhelming. So by understanding that overload and overstimulation that's happening in our brains because of the way that our brain is processing all of the information and all of what is happening in our environment, and then filtering through it as to what's important and what's not, we can start to use strategies to decrease that overload, decrease that stimulation so that we're not feeling so overwhelmed. So some of these things are fidget toys, headphones, noise canceling devices. Also just understanding like this is an overstimulating situation and telling ourselves that it's okay, right? It's okay that I'm feeling overstimulated right now. There's not anything wrong with me in this situation. I'm just processing way more information than most people are in this situation, and that's why it's overwhelming for me. So finding quieter spaces, finding rest times, bringing some of our comfort items, these are all things that can help us with the overstimulation in certain situations. So we're not avoiding the situation, but we're also understanding this situation might be more difficult for me to manage than a neurotypical brain would find that situation. So another crucial strategy is implementing personalized and practical strategies and toolkits. So this goes beyond just talking about the feelings, just talking about what's going on for our experience, but it's about building concrete tools. So this is something that I've talked about throughout the history of the podcast, and something that I find really important about therapy is that we're walking away from the therapeutic process with something that we can work on. And so with my neurodivergent clients, I try to be really proactive in giving skills and strategies and tools to work on and practice in between sessions, so that we're building that connection between when I'm feeling a certain way, this is what I can do. So say a client is working on executive function or executive dysfunction rather, the ability to plan and organize and complete tasks, and they're struggling with this. You might feel constantly overwhelmed or behind, or like you're not keeping up. So we're going to build a toolkit that helps you to stay focused, to stay on track, to find strategies that are working. We're going to break tasks down into smaller steps. We're going to use tools like Goblin tools, or perhaps some sort of AI generated chat, to be able to help us figure out what needs to happen in this scenario and how can I follow through with what's going on. Creating workspaces and strategies that kind of help us stay focused and understand what's going on as well. So I think one of the big things is that I get a lot of resistance when I say, let's use checklists, let's use tools or apps in order to support us, or alarms. And I get that resistance, that pushback to say, oh, I don't want to be told what to do, or this is just a crutch, or no one else has to do this in my life. Why do I have to use these strategies? And I think one of the things is recognizing that these more concrete tools, the ways in which we're coping with it, other people don't use because they have a neurotypical brain, and that's okay, right? Those are the strategies that work for them, but these are the strategies that typically work for a neurodivergent brain when working with certain things. And so we're going to use different tools, we're going to show up differently, and there might be some resistance to that, and yet holding ourselves accountable and doing that work is so important. The next coping strategy that many people wish that they had known sooner or come to sooner is cultivating self-acceptance, and unlearning some of that "there's something wrong with me" belief system. So we live in a society that often subtly, or maybe not so subtly, up to say that different is bad, right? To subtly kind of promote this idea that unless we're doing it one way, this way, then we're doing it wrong, or you're not capable of it, or that that's inefficient, right? And so we slowly start to learn these messages as we grow up, learning that the way that I do this is incorrect, or the way that I do this is wrong, and therefore I am wrong. Therefore, I am not as capable as my peers or my family or my coworkers. And so I think starting to challenge some of those beliefs and starting to look at, where am I truly not feeling like I'm not enough, or that there's something wrong with me? Can I start to question some of these things and explore some of these things to build a new belief system and help to alleviate some of the stress of "there's something wrong with me"? So I think this is also understanding that things that we typically saw as flaws or something wrong with me, is actually not a flaw, right? Like this is something valuable. This is something that adds to your experience of a human. Or if it is causing distress or something that isn't working in your life anymore, perhaps it's a coping strategy that is maladaptive, then can I find a coping strategy that works better for me, that allows me to embrace the neurodivergence and better cope with our operating system and how we're functioning? Which leads into the immense relief that comes with harnessing the strengths and interests that we have as neurodivergent individuals. So we often have intense interests or hyperfixations, unique strengths that other family members or coworkers or peers don't have. And when we can lean into and accept and acknowledge that this is what's happening for us and these are the experiences that we're having, then we can start to cultivate them as strengths rather than dismissing them or trying to push them away or trying to change them. So leaning into strengths like creativity or attention to detail or taking different perspectives. We can learn to manage our stress in many different ways when we start to embrace these parts of ourselves. So if we have a deep interest, for example, in something, then we might be told that we need to focus on something else, or no one's interested in that. But allowing ourselves to dive into our passions and really feel the joy of the things that we're interested in, and finding people who enjoy those conversations, can be really important, right? And saying that just because you don't enjoy this doesn't mean I can't enjoy this, and vice versa, right? Like I think also acknowledging that someone might not feel as joyful or excited about our special interest as we do, and that's okay. And can we find a common ground? And finally, I think one of the strategies that's really important, and something that I talk about with all of my clients, but particularly is important and unique in its experience, is prioritizing self-care and self-soothing. So when we look at our capability to stay in our window and navigate overwhelm or overstimulation, we really want to be focusing on what strategies help me when I'm knocked out of my window or feeling overstimulated. What can I do to help me get back in my window, and understanding that those strategies might look different. And some of those might be things that I need to set up beforehand, again, when going into more difficult situations. So practicing that self-care and keeping ourselves at baseline and understanding how does my nervous system work and what are the things that are triggering, what are the things that are causing my body to think I'm being chased by a tiger when that's not actually happening. Can I start to understand those things and create that buffer system and create a way of understanding your unique brand of overstimulation so that you can stay in your window more often, and also express to others, hey, this is something that's really overstimulating for me, and I'm either going to pass, or can we do it this way so that I can join, I can participate, but that I'm not going to feel so overstimulated by it. So these are unique conversations that we can have in terms of coping strategies of how do I embrace self-care and how do I embrace self-soothing, so that I can stay within my window. And sometimes that looks different for people who are experiencing neurodivergence. So these strategies are about shifting from trying to be someone we're not into understanding and accepting and empowering who we are and the unique abilities and operating systems that we have, without trying to be something that society is trying to tell us that we should be, or that we don't feel is authentic to ourselves. So they are tools that unlock our ability to embrace and accept and move through the discomfort of living in a neurotypical world. So thank you so much for joining me. And I hope that you learned something that maybe helps you spark a conversation with your therapist about your experience and some coping strategies that you would like to work on. So remember that discovering and implementing coping strategies honor your unique operating system are so important to breaking through some of the stigma and overwhelm that comes with living in a neurotypical world. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and until next time, take care. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Confessions of a Counselor podcast is available anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts on Apple and Android. New episodes are released every Friday. If you enjoyed today's episode, please join the conversation. Leave a review or subscribe to the podcast hosted on Spotify. You can find all these details on janicelyons.com. Until next time, take care.